This conference will now be recorded.
Cool. Okay, actually, Adam Shepard in the back there connected Irina and I over the idea of having a session around kind of linked open data, web technologies to connect multiple organizations' data, et cetera. And so we brought together the previous session, which was just a bunch of talks, and then I wanted to give us some time to follow up on those talks and to kind of continue some of the threads that we've been discussing this week and offline while we're all here in person with some more focused time. So my hope is that this session can be some time for people that don't necessarily get a chance to work together to get together and either start some kind of collaboration or kick off some kind of collaboration or move the ball forward on something you're already doing. I mean, there's lots of stuff happening in scienceonschema.org that could maybe use a chit chat. There's stuff happening in the Open Knowledge Networks projects that could use some talk. We've got a few big brains here from Australia and New Zealand that would be probably interesting to pick. Um, and so take advantage of this opportunity to talk to folks. So that was an inelegant way to put that, wasn't it? Oh, really? You don't? You, oh, oh, sorry. You pick people's brains here in the States. Did I? Sorry. So, all right. So, the last thing I'll say before I jump into the ideas for some of our breakouts is mine. So I lead the IT&I webinars, and my hope is, and so we've been talking about some of the stuff that we heard about here on previous IT&I talks, and my hope is that we can continue that series. I know we're going to have another from the location index. Um, Oh, excuse me. It's thank you for asking. It's the interoperability or the information technology and interoperability um, cluster working group. I don't even know what they're called. Cluster. Yeah. Um, eh, Committee. It's a committee. Um, but it's a webinar series at the end of the day. Yeah, it's official. It's a monthly webinar. So, anyways, um, my hope is that we can have some webinars about the topics that we've talked about here. Maybe some of the 10-minute talks could come back for a longer talk. Maybe some of the breakouts could come back to present what they talked about and what their plan is, et cetera. So um, hopefully we can come up, if you do have an idea for a breakout, and we're gonna get to that, I want these to be aimed to have some kind of tangible outcome. And so I've listed off some kind of concepts for what those might look like to help shape your thinking a little bit. And then some potential topics that I have heard people talking about and I think are particularly interesting. Um, One that I know I've talked to Jonathan about is we've got an awful lot of these linked data systems that are either just getting off the ground or are kind of trying to figure out how to take it to that next level of operational readiness or penetration in web search or whatever it is. And so I think there's maybe some cross team, cross project testing in order, or profiling, or if you want to kind of compare notes about a system that you have running and think about elevating it. So that might be one breakout. Um, we've got some really interesting new stuff that's hitting around the idea of like content variability from a given information resource. So content negotiation by profile, selection of alternate or different views of the same resource. I think that's an area that we, in a number of projects I'm aware of, are kind of stumbling on. It might be something to get together and talk about how we want to go forward, or just list the problems that we want to solve for future solution. Um, the third one I have here is something that we in Elfie have been stumbling on and falling over is this idea that there are some links that go to kind of in-band RDF, graph data, and there are other links in your graph that don't go to that kind of information. And there's some nuances with how those get encoded and how you might use them in linked data that are really clumsy, or we don't have any clear solutions to right now. So that's one for the people that are maybe a little deeper into the linked data technology. That's a problem that I know I've seen on the scienceonschema.org list, some issues around that with, and anyways, yeah. So that'd be an idea. And then the last one, and kind of the one I want to champion, is how do we cross this world between spatial coverage data, and the primary example that always comes to mind for me is a flood model that's estimating flood depth over some area, and linked data for, say, locations. So how do you integrate that flood depth model data into something that's ostensibly entities that are resources? And there's some twists on that use case that I think are interesting to talk about. So, okay, so those are the 4 topics that I had in mind, based on some of the problems we've been running into in these linked data projects and some of the things that I've been thinking about personally. But I want to, first I want to just kind of pause for a minute and let people think, and maybe talk to a neighbor or talk to somebody else in the room about a topic. And then we'll go around, and if people have other ideas for breakouts, I want to get a quick, basically get a quick shout from people that have ideas, and then we'll go from there and form breakouts. So, so let's pause for 5 minutes, and you can, and we'll come back as a group to figure out what the breakouts are going to be. Does that sound good? Questions? That's a good question. Just a show of hands, would one of those 4 excite you or not? Raise your hands for yes. Let's take a few minutes to see if there are other ideas in the room. Oh, and if you want to pop in here and write them down in this document is linked in the SCED page for this session, right there.
Pick rides in New Zealand too, but because of our accents, puck rides, right?
Okay.
Which makes it a little bit difficult to understand sometimes.
Okay, got it. Maybe. So you think is that one breakout group? I think they yeah. So wait, did Will? Say Will. Adam, did you get with Adam? Okay. He was looking for you to potentially talk about it. Yeah. At least I think it was Adam. Maybe it was Doug. Boyan talked about, one of the primary problems they're doing there is each node in the graph of, so if you treat each standalone linked data system as a node in the graph, they each connect up to each other with some of their associations.
Yeah. That's the problem we're doing.
Yeah, no, and so we've actually, for that project, we put in place like the, I forget what we call it, but it's like all the outbound links, right, are on that page. So you can just go to that page and see what it connects to.
Yeah, like, I was naming all like, use some standard query language.
Well, in that case, it's just already out. I think that's a worthwhile. That gives you ideas, but we can go from there.
Well, the Spark was. It's what everybody's used to, so they assume it's nothing else. There was something in the talk about programmers see a Sparkle or they don't know it. Gremlin is much more friendly.
Nice. All right, let's pull back together. I've heard a couple of ideas. So I heard combine 2 and 3 here. This is really loud. I don't know what to do with that. God, I just want to turn it off. Can you turn this thing off? Yeah. Okay, so we've had. It was okay? It sounded really boomy. Okay, I can't. I'm hearing an echo of myself. No. Have you heard of this? Like the way that you get people to stop talking is you play themselves back to themselves at about a tenth of a second lag, and they just can't process their own voice on that. And that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing this echo, anyways. So we had one idea for talking about linked data system federation, which is, I think, so we heard like the GSIP project that Boyan presented is talking about how to federate a linked data system from the US with a linked data system from Canada. That's an interesting topic. So that's on the list. We had another suggestion that the ones I had here in 2 and 3 are related enough that could be one breakout. So I guess that'd be like content negotiation and in-band and out-of-bound links. Are there any other ideas? Yeah.
I think there was some folks interested in number 4.
Okay. Any others? Is number one on?
Could I add an idea to the doc?
Absolutely. Do you guys want to do one? Sounds like you were already going. Oops. So, show of hands, who doesn't see one of these ideas that you would want to sign up for? Can you pick one of, can we get everybody into one of these? Okay. Yeah, so I was actually just reading what you were writing, and I think it's similar to.
Actually, a direct response to Tony's brought up in Jonathan's presentation.
Yeah, it kind of goes with number 2. Yeah, I was going to say, and a little bit number 4. Well, no, it's definitely a. Yeah, no. So. Well, so let's just do a show of hands for each one. So for testing linked data systems and for interoperability and/or consistent behavior, who's in? We've got 1. No? Oh, you actually, okay. I love it. Just, well, these are groups that you would be part of. Yeah. So that one's actually maybe not, okay, so how about the Linked Data Systems Federation, Convenience API, Linked Data, or Query Language? We have 3 people over here. You do that one? Okay, so we have a group of 4 for that one. That's legit.
This is not legit. Apparently, it's 3.
Well, you got 4. There's somebody back. And I might join you, depending. So then content negotiation and in-band and out-of-band links. That's the heavy one. 4, 5. Okay. Incorporating spatial coverages into linked data and knowledge graphs. Yeah, like 6, 7, 8. Cool. And then how to incorporate other database systems in graph queries. What's the role of spatial knowledge graph in relation to arbitrary data indexes? 1, 2, 3. I think that's 4. Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's good. So, yeah.
That last one's quite a nice binding idea that, as we're discussing the other ones, we bear that in mind. Because otherwise it can be very, very focused.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm sorry we have right now, but yeah.
Yeah, good luck to the group that's going to talk about that one. It's a lot. Okay, so this room's a little bit unfortunate, but I think we can do this with the smaller, maybe the smaller groups can join in little pods in this room. We can try. I don't know how that's going to work. Yeah, so that's what I was going to do. So so I think we're striking that one, right? This one, why don't you guys gather down here, if that works? The content negotiation, gather up in the back of the room, and you can migrate to the bar when you like. Spatial coverages, why don't we meet on the couches out there? Well, I mean, there's couches right outside the door, so why not? because I don't really want to have to sit in the middle of all this. And we can gather at the very top or at the very bottom, but being in the middle just seems unfortunate. So then the other databases maybe in that side of the room in the back? That sound good? Cool. So that leaves an hour to play or go to the bar. So I kind of just want to leave the hour for folks to talk. Please do keep notes of what you're doing in this document. And yeah, why don't we get back? Why don't we get back together with 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Yeah. 10 minutes, Alistair says. Yeah, 5:20. Let's reconvene at 5:20 and just real quick debrief. Yeah, so they'll let you bring your beer back. I don't have a bell. I need a bell. Oh, no, I can do here. No, never mind. My bag's, I don't know where my bag is. Whatever, it's all good. That's not, no, I'm up there. All right. It's 10 till. Let's just go around and see how that went and what people are going to carry forward. So just to kind of set the stage for how I imagined these going. Hopefully everybody put their notes in the shared doc. If you didn't, please do drop some notes in here so everybody can see what you've committed to. In the spatial coverages and knowledge graph session, we had a pretty healthy little conversation, covering a fair amount of ground in terms of use cases, but really focused on kind of models that generate coverages in real time or geospatial data that's static that you might want to sample into a knowledge graph. So we came up with kind of level 1, just go get the coverage. Level 1.5, go get the coverage and work with it out of band and put the values back in the graph. Level 2, a reproducible workflow that uses a convenience API to get the coverage. And then level 3 would be an automated workflow that could say, get a model in real time and update the graph. So that was interesting. I think one of my big takeaways was you might save the statistics from the coverage into the knowledge graph over time as kind of baseline statistics to help understand the state of the coverage as it updates through time. Thinking like historical maximums, historical minimums, historical averages, these kinds of things. That's a nice integration between coverages and knowledge graphs. There is apparently in CIS 1.1, there's this notion that you could return the value of a coverage and its location in RDF. So there's already kind of, if you had an embedded convenience API call to get a coverage value, that's already there. Carrying this forward, where am I? Oh, there's more notes that got dropped in here. We definitely want to explore kind of tessellations, DGGS more in this space. Definitely going to carry some of these ideas forward to the environmental data retrieval SWIG at OGC. There's some potential feedback to the OGC API coverages SWIG for how to get the OGC API for coverages to work well in knowledge graphs. And the UFOKN folks in the back should be aware of some of these notes because I think it's probably stuff you already know, but it might be useful. So that's what I've got on that one. Do the Linked Data System Federation folks want to go next?
Sure. Can you jump down to the recommended approaches section? Up. Right there. All right. So this was actually, at first I thought this was out of order compared to the session we're going to have tomorrow on generating knowledge graphs.
Okay.
All right, so we're having I see what you mean. We're having a session tomorrow on federating knowledge graphs. And at first I thought these might be out of order, that it would have been nice to have that set of use cases before we got to this. But as it turns out, we were able to get a lot of what I think we would have talked about tomorrow, argued about, it's kind of quote unquote settled today. And so we did talk about essentially, should this be basically done via, should the federation be done via a common API, or should we essentially externalize the information, put it all together, and then offer that out? And I think we decided, the federated API sounds nice, but in reality, it ends up being slow and not very reliable. So realistically speaking, to make it work, we're probably going to pull everything together. We then talked about, whether there's basically a one-time dump, which is probably what you need to get started, particularly for some of these organizations that haven't really even thought about federating. But over time, you might move to more continual harvesting, as well as a publication mechanism, which would allow those federation members to control the publication of their data. We talked a little bit about who gets to publish. I think it's best to have more than one level of authorization, if you will. Institutional publications need to come from just one place, whereas if people are essentially making new relationships by scanning the web or doing stuff like that, that doesn't necessarily need to be tightly controlled. Formats to publish in. I think we settled on 3 sort of main formats, but we'll take other candidates, basically JSON LD, RDF XML, and Turtle. We looked at possible APIs for consuming this data. Sparkle seemed like kind of a given, but you got to be careful with it so that you don't execute a DOS. But then we want to know from the community, what is your favorite, your easiest to use way of accessing that kind of information? And then lastly, I think I would just want to talk about identifiers. So I want to strongly encourage the use of common identifiers, for instance, ORC-IDs for people, ROR for organizations, although obviously you have to broaden beyond this when you've got things like non-research organizations. That's it. So this was great.
Good. I'm glad. I think this turned out as good as I could ask for. Who's next?
We've got the microphone here if anyone is.
Contract negotiation and in and out of band links. Here's
Alistair, I can bring it down to you, or?
No, I'll come stand up. I don't like the attention. He lied. All right. So Will Francis took the notes. These are them. Will is fired. Thank you. Yes. So Will owes Steve a beer, so you can hand over your thing. Anyway, right. There were a few things in this. He said, trying to work out how to present it. We had a couple of problems that were in scope. The first one is probably explaining what we mean by in-band and out-of-band. Let's assume that we're dealing with a linked data system. We're providing JSON LD back as a description of non-information resource, and then we're linking merrily across the web. Now, a lot of those links are what we call in-band. There are URI that are actually referring some other RDF artifact. So you can dereference it, you'll get RDF back. The tool set that you're using to parse it and so on still applies. When we talk about going out of band, it's like we've actually shifted now. We're aware of a web feature service that's providing the data that we're interested in. So we're providing a link to something that will return GML or a PDF or something like that. So immediately you're not going to be able to sort of troll through this data and actually pull things out. You have to switch your tooling. So long story short, we're trying to work out ways of actually explaining when that's different inside the document. And ultimately, very simply, if you're referring to an actual RDF resource in JSON LD, you use that ID. If you're referring to something else, you use URL in the story. The next bit was actually around, okay, I've got these links. Well, I've got the resource and I've got these links. There are different representations available for it. Notwithstanding something can actually be described according to multiple information models, there are multiple content models that are available for something as well. So the structure may be the same, but in Australia for an ISO 19115 metadata profile, there will be vocabularies specific to the Australian instance for content, or certain properties will be mandatory or not. So there's this notion of profiles that's been kicking around for a long time, which are these restrictions of those models to govern content. And there's also just the, hey, can I get this back as RDF XML, JSON LD, or whatever. So we needed we needed to look at ways of actually telling the agent that's parsing this document what it can actually do with it. And we're looking at, there's an announcement, there's some sort of element which announces the profiles that this thing conforms to. And then there's another one, which is the media type it conforms to. And that will be presented both at the root of the object or in a reference to something, something else. And then the final bit was, okay, well, how do we formalize these profiles? And the Data Exchange Working Group on the W3C has come up with a model for what they call content negotiation by profile, where you augment HTTP content negotiation with not only do you request a media type, you also ask for the thing according to this profile. And that's a draft specification, but looks reasonably nice. The second bit is, okay, actually, what is this profile? We know we want a unique URI, we want a persistent URI for it, so it can be continually referred to, but how do we actually describe the constraints that profile applies to the data? That's getting a little bit tricky. There is a prototype or a draft profile vocabulary out there, which we had a lot of fun not understanding for a little while. But then there's also actually stuff like Shackle, which actually do exactly what we want. So we need to investigate that. So the upshot of all this, of a group that would like to walk away with, is something that is someone that I think refines what we're doing in the Selfie project around handling those links, but coming up with a way now of handling profiles, presenting them both in the data and formalizing them for use.
Future ESIP project? Sorry? Future ESIP project?
I think it is. The ESIP or E2SIP, the Down Under mob could take the lead. Doug was really good. It was like I said, this is a great ESIP project, and he said, yeah, let me know what you come up with. So,
all right, cool. Looks like notes are being taken while you were talking, so that's good. And this was recorded, so we've got all that. And was there one more group that's not in here?
Microphone, or you go down?
All right, so I know that we're at time here, so I'll keep this brief. But yeah, we met up to talk about the role of spatial knowledge graphs kind of vaguely. It started off with, the question, well, are all the tooling for spatial data analysis and transformation going to grow in the future to adopt or support RDF as an underlying data structure, or is it going to continue to be such that RDF is just a view of spatial data existing in these legacy GI systems? And it's a very interesting question that is it's been the topic of it's been a motivator for a lot of the work in my PhD personally in the last few years. And another note that we kind of came up with too is that building information modeling has set an example that it is possible to fully adopt RDF as the core structure or the single source of truth and is made all these interdivision software interoperable with the same self-consistent model. And then we got very ontological and started talking about the conceptualization of geographic entities and how that has far-reaching implications for policy and ecological analysis. And then, how the perspective-oriented characteristics of spatial objects is more important than topology, which is more important than geometry, and yada, yada, yada. So that's the results there.
What's next? You gonna finish your PhD? Yep. That's all. It's all good. Excellent. Well, thank you. Sounds like we've got some good little outcomes. I'm glad we took the time to talk, and I personally will carry some of this stuff forward, and I hope you all will too. And stay tuned. If you're not on it, join up the ITNI list, and we'll. I'll definitely be reaching out to a few people for talks, and if you want to come and give a talk, get a hold of me, and I'm happy to put people on the schedule. So with that, we're 2 minutes over. Thank you very much.